Fellow South Africans and the people of the world, greetings. Welcome to Freedom Park, a national heritage destination and an agency of the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture under the leadership of Minister Nathi Mthethwa. My name is Naomi Madima. Well, one of Freedom Park's objectives is to emancipate the African voice and to tell our history in an African perspective. So Freedom Park employs full-time storytellers on day-to-day basis to tell our own story in our own perspective. I'm going to call upon Justina Dikhale, who is also one of our storytellers.
'94 came and went. Presidents came and went. Even events came and went. But the story came and remained. And the story goes like, it was in 1996 when heads from all the corners came together and said, Ile too, we want a place called Freedom Park. We want a place where we would talk freely about our struggle life. We want a place where we would honor our struggle heroes and heroes. Hey, we want a place where we would reflect upon ourselves and revisit ourselves, tell our best stories the best way we know how to. All has included the civil society organizations, political organizations, traditional leaders, even religious leaders. But TRC put a name. TRC put a stamp on all the ideas. And it was in 1999 when the legendary Umtata Dr. Nelson Mandela said, yes, yebo ngiyavuma, I give it a thumb up. But like I said, presidents came and went. Now President Mandela left. President Mandela went. And President Thabo Mbeki came into being. President Thabo Mbeki was well known as TM. And African. President Thabo Mbeki worked very much hard to fulfill the dream. And as a result, Freedom Park came into being. Freedom Park was born. Like a Khoi would say, a dream is not a dream until it's shared by the whole community. This particular president, President Thabo Mbeki, handed out an olive tree leaf to the CEOs. But nevertheless, CEOs came and left. Now CEO Miss Lindiwe Giba left. And the CEO, Dr. Wally Serote, came into being. Now, Freedom Park stood up so proudly there on top of the hill at Salvokop. That was after the brains and the bodily sweats of the individuals around the globe. The locals came and said, hey, this is how it's been done. This is how we know it. This is who we are. This is what we are. As they were adding their experience and knowledge. Let me also involve our sisters and brothers from Africa who also came and said, this is who we are. They were also adding their experience and knowledge to the pot. Let me not forget the internationals, those whom we shared their struggles, their sufferings, as well as their jubilation, as they were adding into the mix. But we humiliated because they helped us to fight the system that is colonization and apartheid. Because our efforts and achievements of freedom and democracy came into being. Freedom and democracy were only going to be achieved through Freedom Park. Now, freedom and democracy were released and realized when our heroes and heroines were repatriated from their second homes. That is Swaziland, Lesotho, Mozambique, Botswana, Angola, Cuba, and all the countries. I'm still saying freedom and democracy were released and realized when the faces of our heroes and heroines were displayed and honored at Freedom Park's Gallery of Leaders. I am still saying freedom and democracy were released and realized when the names of our heroes and heroines were recorded on the wall of names. Here I'm talking about Solomon Mahlangu. Here I'm talking about Chris Han. But again, the year 2000 went. Then 2011 came in. CEOs went. The CEO, Mr. Fanachia, went. And the CEO, Ms. Jane Mufamadi, came in. And that is when finally Freedom Park became the full lighted house as Kapa Interactive Museum or space came into being and was born. This is where the history of humanity and of the universe is displayed and preserved. The Freedom Park, the Park of the Freedom. Bye-bye yesterday and hello tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Jane Mufamadi joined Freedom Park, a national heritage destination, whilst it was still in its conceptualization and construction stages, as a consultant, and later on as the head of Department for Heritage and Knowledge. She is the current CEO of Freedom Park and the fourth CEO of Freedom Park. I am pleased to introduce to you the current CEO of Freedom Park, Ms. Jane Mufamadi, to share her impressions of this historic and auspicious place.
I would like to start by acknowledging President Thabo Mbeki, former President of the Republic of South Africa, our Minister of the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, Honorable Nathi Mthethwa, our Deputy Chairperson of Council, His Majesty Kgosi Mabalane, the former CEO of Freedom Park, Professor Wally Serote. I would also like to acknowledge our dear stakeholders, our staff here at Freedom Park, and the nation at large. It was on the 27th of April, 1999, while delivering his Freedom Day speech, that President Mandela said, and I quote, "It is therefore a weakness on our part that we have yet to create a monument to remember them all, and all South Africans who sacrificed so that we should be free. The day should not be far off when we shall have a people's shrine, a Freedom Park where we shall honor with all the dignity they deserve those who endured pain, so we should experience the joy of freedom." Indeed, the project was launched on the 1st of June 2000, and it took about 2 years to unpack what Madiba said and to finalize the conceptualization process. And on the 16th of June 2002, President Thabo Mbeki led the sword turning and planted the African olive tree, which was done to mark the construction phase of Freedom Park. This action by the President signaled the beginning of the construction phase of Freedom Park, which was done in 2 phases. Phase 1 being the Garden of Remembrance, comprising the memorial established to acknowledge the men, women, and children who made the ultimate sacrifice for freedom of our country. And Phase 2 comprising the Interpretive Center, or the museum called Thabo, telling the African story dating as far back as 3.6 billion years. Today, as we celebrate 20 years of Freedom Park's establishment, we are indeed humbled and privileged to witness a milestone of this magnitude. This park was established to celebrate our attainment of democracy, to celebrate the triumph of the human spirit, to contribute to the building of an inclusive, non-racial, non-sexist society, to contribute to social cohesion, reconciliation and nation building, and the building of safer communities, to honor those who paid the ultimate price for our freedom and humanity, to assist in healing the divisions of the past by encouraging South Africans to begin the journey towards forgiveness and healing. Therefore, in conceptualizing and constructing the park, it was necessary to define what we were constructing and ask ourselves these fundamental questions. Whose purpose will it serve? How will it perform? And what will make it successful? Respond also to the needs of the community, while at the same time achieving the mandate for which it was being constructed. The design, the aesthetics, and the architecture testify to the fact that Freedom Park was designed with an African heart rather than the African theme. The park reflects the spirit of indigenous African architecture without turning it into just a themed building that rings false. It was important that both the building and its context expresses truth and integrity, and we believe that we have achieved that. Freedom Park has established itself as a knowledge hub for the emancipation of the African voice in the country. This framework is shaped by the philosophical approach that focuses on the utilization of ontologies and epistemologies that have their roots in African indigenous knowledge systems. We have, in expressing the Africanness of our country, integrated indigenous knowledge systems in spirit, in architecture, in patterns, in forms, in aesthetics, in arts, in culture, and the general African epistemology. Taking all these aspects into account, Freedom Park comprises a cultural district of uncommon purpose and scope, ambition, and a promise. It is a place of remembrance, a memorial to the fallen, an archive of living history, and a museum of all people. It has become a South African center of culture, of history, and reconciliation. And it has already become a place for others around the world to learn from the South African example and to take away new knowledge for the betterment of humanity around the world. Freedom Park is a place where the nation could come to heal, to debate, and to come to new understandings. Moreover, it will be a place of reconciliation and nation building, a place where the nation will learn to focus on that which unites us, instead of being blinded by that which separates us and our past. It will be a place where stereotypes will be exposed and obliterated. It will launch the nation on a route of healing, of acceptance and forgiveness. It will be instrumental in reconciliation and nation building, in opening up and exploring new avenues of social cohesion, and it will be the heartbeat of all that is South African. As we celebrate 20 years of our existence, there are notable achievements, too many to enumerate. However, I'm just going to highlight a few of those. To date, we have honored almost 150,000 heroes and heroines of our liberation struggle. And of this, more than 139,000 have already been inscribed on our wall of names. These names are categorized into 8 conflicts that shaped what we call South Africa today. And these categories are the pre-colonial wars, the wars of resistance, genocide of the Khoi and the San, slavery, the South African War, World War I and II, and the 4 pillars of the liberation struggle. We have also hosted over 54 heads of states from across the world to show that Freedom Park is the center of humanity. Freedom Park is the center for Africa, and Freedom Park is the center for South African history and heritage. We have worked with local and continental communities in projects that deals with issues of memorialization, reconciliation, and forgiveness. Not only were we voted amongst the top 10 architecturally striking museums in the world by Visi magazine, but we were also voted as the best heritage site in Tshwane for 3 years in succession by Pretoria news readers. We have also won several architectural awards, amongst others, the South African Institute of Architects Award of Merit in 2014, the South African Institute of Architects Award of Excellence, again in 2014, and this project also received an ILASA Award of Excellence in Landscaping. All this makes us proud, especially because this is an affirmation that when we rely on our own cultures and heritage, when we rely on our own indigenous knowledge systems, we can become the best of the best in the world. We could not have achieved all this had it not been the support of our stakeholders, the faith-based communities, the Names Verification Committee, which is an independent committee comprising various stakeholders, the academia, the women's movements, the youth organizations, civil societies, and even those that regard themselves as minority groups in South Africa. But most especially, we want to convey our appreciation and humble thanks to the organic intellectuals. I just want to mention a few of these organic intellectuals who were the backbone of what Freedom Park is today. And these are Mama Grace Masuku from the Northwest, Baba Credo Mutwa, who's late, who really was at the center of teaching us about indigenous knowledge systems. Makoza from Mpumalanga province, Mam Noria Mavasa from Limpopo, and Ma Helen Sibidi, and many other more women and men who assisted us, who taught us about who we are as a people and as South Africans. We also cannot forget the founders and the forebears of Freedom Park, like the late General Lihlonolo Muloi, the late General Masondo, Ma Gertrude Shope, Mama Bridget Mavandla, and former President Thabo Mbeki. I would also like to acknowledge and appreciate my predecessors, the former CEOs of Freedom Park, Ms. Linda Gad, Professor Wally Serote, who is also my mentor and has a special place in my heart, and also Mr. Fana Giane for the foundation that they have laid to make Freedom Park what it is today. Building from these critical steps and achievements, it is now time for Freedom Park to adopt a forward-looking approach that will entrench its significance not only to the general South African populace, but to leave a footprint in the continent and the diaspora. Amongst others, we are focusing on driving and promoting continental integration from below. We believe that people-to-people contact and cultural diplomacy is the way to go. Freedom Park can better play this role through its societal connectedness with critical continental stakeholders, such as indigenous knowledge systems and other like-minded institutions. That is why we have honored not only South Africans, but those from the continent and the diaspora who contributed through international solidarity. As Freedom Park, as South Africans, we know that we would not have attained our freedom had it not been the support of many other people from the continent in particular and the diaspora. And that is why within our wall of names, you will also find their names inscribed there. We believe that international solidarity is a practical example towards building unity in the continent. Secondly, we are focusing on collaboration, not only with heritage institutions in South Africa, so that we minimize duplications and maximize synergy and coherence, but to tell a complete South African and continental story. We also make a call to the private sector to support our initiatives and our endeavors. A nation that prides itself with its heritage, culture, and identity is a nation that has the capacity to build peace and stability. which are required for socio-economic development. Business will not thrive if there is no peace and stability. Therefore, peace and stability comes from a nation that takes pride and protects who it is and its heritage resources. We will be intensifying the names collection project both within South Africa and the continent, honoring the heroes and heroines of the liberation struggle. We will also be mobilizing, in particular, the SADC community for the observation of the 23rd of March as a day of reflection, remembering the Battle of Kitekinevale that was the turning point of the freedom of South Africa. We will be launching several programs and activities that will place Freedom Park in the hearts and minds of all South Africans. This includes the Friends of Freedom Park initiatives, where members of the communities will be part of the history making, history writing, as well as correcting the distortions of the past about our identities as Africans. And with these initiatives, we will be telling the world and everybody who wants to listen who we are, where we come from, and where we want to go in our own voices. And I just want to say, watch the space, check our social media, check our website, and there are many more activities lined up as we celebrate 20 years of our existence as Freedom Park. Thank you.
Dr. Mongane Wally Serote was the second Chief Executive Officer of Freedom Park, a national heritage destination. And he is hailed as one of the people who immensely contributed in the shaping of the organization to what it is today. It is my greatest pleasure to call upon Dr. Serote to share his thoughts with us.
It is very important that we are at that time now where we celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Freedom Park. The Freedom Park is a spiritual, it's a resistance and liberation garden of remembrance of our country. The Freedom Park is also handed over to us as a nation a legacy of 4 billion years of legacy. It is very important that we as South Africans consistently remember this and make it our reference to understand the responsibility that that legacy gives us. The Freedom Park is also a Pan-African and an African Renaissance garden of remembrance. We have honored in that space of Freedom Park the great fighters, liberation fighters of our country, so that we never forget them, but we never also forget where we come from in terms of our struggle and what lives were given so that we are a free people. The Freedom Park also has recognized internationally all the people who took firm positions internationally in Cuba and in other countries on the continent. We've recognized them through what we call the garden, the garden of remembrance at Freedom Park. People like Che Guevara, Julius Nyerere, O.R. Tambo, Lillian Ngoyi, Helen Joseph, and others. We recognize their spirit of no surrender to ensure the liberation of our country. It is extremely important that at this hour of 20th century, we try to think what is it that we must do so that the Freedom Park, because of what it stands for in our country, as I've said, you know, it starts with recognizing the people who fought against genocide, the people who fought against genocide, and the people who fought during the slavery in our country, the people who fought in the resistance wars, the people who fought in the Anglo-Boer War, South Africa War, the people who fought in all these wars, about 7, 8 of them, our people participated. It is a very strong expression of resistance, but it is also a very strong expression of a commitment for the liberation of our country. We should never ever forget that as a people. We must always ask ourselves, as I was saying, how do we ensure that Freedom Park consistently inspires us to emulate those who laid their lives down, to emulate those who sacrificed time and everything, especially the leaders of the liberation struggle, the movement, our movement, and other movements which participated in the struggle. What is it that we should do to ensure that it consistently tells us that at the point at which we were fighting for freedom, we said freedom must be permanent in our country. It must be permanent because it will permeate every facet of our lives in South Africa, on the continent, in the diaspora, and as an example to humanity for a people who for many years were oppressed, starting even with the slave trade. When we were conceptualizing Freedom Park, we used to say we must conceptualize it so that even 2,000 years from now, when things go wrong in our country, as they have now, people must never forget to visit Freedom Park, to go and find strength, to go and get inspiration, to think properly, to plan properly, to ensure that they buttress the freedom which was fought for so hard. You know, when eventually we were told that we should take responsibility as a group of people to ensure that we build Freedom Park, we went around the country asking people, if you will say what we build there represents your deep feelings about this country, your understanding of where we come from and where should we go, what would you say? It should say this Freedom Park. And there were two very important things which emerged now and then. The first thing is that our people said it is very important that Freedom Park reflects on the fact that the soil of this country is soaked in human blood of freedom fighters who fought for liberation. But also there are many who have survived, who carry within them wounds which are unhealing. You must never forget that when you build that place, it is to address these feelings that we carry with us. So we cannot find a manner to forget such a drastic and very serious portrayal of what people wanted Freedom Park to be. We hope that eventually we have done so. When I left Freedom Park, there were two very special things which were supposed to be completed. One was we were going to build a lake for peace. The other was we were going to reflect on the blazing role that President Mbeki played in entrenching a consciousness, a Pan-African consciousness, an African Renaissance consciousness in the mind of South Africans that we have to claim to be part and parcel of the African continent and of the diaspora. Unfortunately, I left before we completed that, but also there was another matter that needed to be completed. We had started a nursery because the first people who went to the mountain, which was at that time like a jungle, The first people who went there to go and designate how it should be approached were indigenous healers. And their brief was find a manner to do an audit of every plant that is there on the mountain and tell us what is its name in the various African languages and what do the plants do, which they did. They submitted 2 reports, but also they did an extra thing. They wanted to position the plants on the mountain such that those plants contribute to tranquility, because it was expected that a lot of people who came to the mountain, who came when we completed, who would come when we complete the Freedom Park, they would come there to come and heal. So I'm saying also that Freedom Park is a healing space for South Africans, for Africans, for the Africans in the diaspora, and for humanity. It must be like that. It must be maintained such that it has this sacredness about it. It has this ability to calm people down, to make people contemplate, ponder, understand what it means that now South Africa is a free country, politically free country, fighting to be economically free. What does it mean? Fighting to be part and parcel of the African continent, fighting to be part and parcel of human, progressive and humane thought of the world. So that garden of remembrance called Freedom Park should be a very special space for Africans wherever they are. It should also be a very special place, because whatever we were fighting for, I am confident that we share with other human beings in the deepest sense of the word of sharing. So it should be nurtured in that way. I hope that those who have taken over will still find it in themselves to complete the 2 main things that I mentioned. The lake was to bring tranquility, peace, and meditation space at Freedom Park, so that people, when they come there, after they've gone through the whole of the park, they can also go and rest next to a large water space, which we at that time in Shangaan we were calling it Tiba. But the other matter which we thought would address the future of young people was the question of Pan-Africanism and African Renaissance part that President Mbeki played. In my mind, it is still an unfinished business, but however, I know that at Thabo, where 7 epochs were laid down to walk us through, first starting with the question of the 4 billion years right up to now, when we are in South Africa and when the continent as a whole is free, and when we are addressing the issues about their diaspora. I was hoping that it would have been addressed, because it is already a history which has to be portrayed and depicted, but it is also a culture which we must live through and take utter responsibility to make sure that it is never forgotten. It becomes part and parcel of our fiber as Africans. With those words, I am most thankful that now there's a new CEO who I know very well, with whom I've worked, and congratulations to her in terms of what she has done so far. I am aware that the names of the comrades who fell has increased tremendously since I was there. A very important milestone and recognition of who we are as a people. Also, I'm hoping that in terms of the gallery of leaders, which I earlier incorrectly called garden of remembrance. The number of people, because when I left, there were 37 leaders that people had voted for. And we had not even reached half of that number. It is important to complete those things, because very soon, those of us who have memory about what happened will pass. And those who come in will question, and they must find answers. That is another very important role of Freedom Park. Lastly, what I want to say is this. The issue of Freedom Park was that it has clearly demonstrated that there is a very unique knowledge which Africans have, the indigenous knowledge systems, which was a very important point of reference when we're building it. That whole space, in essence, the design schemes which were given to architects came from elders, elderly women, indigenous practitioners, elderly men and women, holders of indigenous knowledge systems. And we had a group of them who at all times, inch for inch, we consulted with them. And it was very important that we do that to remind this nation that there is a knowledge called indigenous knowledge systems which must be a reference point. And if we make it a reference point, it contributes to the reconstruction and development of our country culturally and in many, many other ways. Especially one of the things that recognize that is the tree that President Mbeki planted, the olive tree, with a plaque which quotes one of the most important reference points of indigenous knowledge systems, Mutu ke mutu kabat. A human being is a human being because of other human beings. A very important reference point, especially now in this hour when parts of our world are going extremely reactionary. We must forever remember this saying at Freedom Park. I thank you very much.
This historic day, the 1st of June 2020, Freedom Park, a national heritage destination and an agency of the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, currently under the leadership of Honorable Minister Nathi Mthethwa, commemorates 20 years of its inception. I am going to call upon the Honorable Minister Nathi Mthethwa to share his thoughts about this momentous day.
Fellow South Africans, today is an important day. It marks the 20th anniversary of Freedom Park, the national monument, which also others refer to it as a national shrine that reflects the triumph of humanity over evil. The South African nation is a product of many streams of history and culture, representing the origins, dispersal, and reintegration of humanity over hundreds of years, in fact, hundreds, thousands of years. When you trace the cradle of humankind, you'll go even to many, many hundreds of thousands of years. Archaeological findings themselves in various parts of this country, South Africa, and the rest of Africa have located South Africa and the continent at large as the cradle of humankind and early forms of human civilization. Now, Freedom Park, its existence is based on this understanding of our history as humanity. The park itself was created for historic and educational objectives, interest of the public, to acknowledge the heritage of a people of South Africa and to promote the development of a common identity and purpose for all South Africans. The key message of Freedom Park revolves around the struggle of people for humanity and freedom. In a way, it symbolizes one of the key connections amongst all South Africans from all backgrounds to create and foster a new national consciousness of the common legacy that binds the people of South Africa. Freedom Park is envisaged as a place where the historical, cultural, political, spiritual resources of the nation will be animated so that visitors will be able to reach a new understanding of a fractured yet complex past, explore the diversity that is one of South Africa's greatest strengths, and create shared dreams of the future. In essence, the Freedom Park's objectives is creating a heritage site that is envisaged as a place in which the successes and contradictions of the present may be discussed, and new understandings is reached on how we should move forward as South Africans. We owe all of this to our future. This place is very important in our history. It's a creation of a democratic order in this country. It's a place where we are able to trace our history, as we said, as humankind, but also our history as South Africans and Africans, and share our heritage in that history. It also takes us through the struggles of the people of this country, through the wars which took place within the borders of this country, but also pay tribute to those who sacrifice for freedom and democracy. And most of those people are South Africans, but you also have people who have been part of the broader progressive movement who come across and beyond the national borders of South Africa, who participated in the struggle for freedom, which essentially is a struggle for social progress for all of humanity. You are taken through, when you come to Freedom Park, on the journey, the spiritual journey of a people. This is a place where, in one section of Freedom Park, you connect with the whole of the country, together with the continent, as a proud African country, which is part and parcel of the progressive Pan-Africanist movement. We are hoping that all South Africans will take time to visit the Freedom Park, because visiting Freedom Park is going to remind us and enlighten us on the journey traversed, on where we are today as we map the way forward into a united, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, and prosperous South Africa. Let us see you all, South Africans, come and visit your national monument, your national shrine. Thank you for your attention.
The second democratically elected president of the Republic of South Africa, Honorable Mr. Thabo Mbeki, is the one who symbolically signaled the commencement of the construction. I am honored to call upon him to share as to how the organization was conceptualized.
I feel very privileged and honored to have this opportunity to participate in this event, which marks the 20th anniversary of the Freedom Park. I'm saying that I'm very honored and privileged to do this because of the unique nature of Freedom Park. Because indeed there are other monuments in our country which are important, like the Robben Island Museum, like the Lily's Leaf Museum, all of which are important. But I'm saying this particular one, Freedom Park, is unique. It's unique because it's the only monument in our country which celebrates our national freedom. And therefore, indeed, it is a matter of particular honor that I have and privilege that I have an opportunity to speak today to celebrate this 20th anniversary of Freedom Park. And the Freedom Park is unique also in other ways. And what I want to do is I will read something which I wrote some years ago about Freedom Park, which was never published. But I think it communicates a very, very good and important message about what Freedom Park is. And it says one of the greatest challenges that has faced us since our liberation has been the obligation to infuse into the national consciousness and conduct, and hopefully for all time, a permanent celebration of the sustained and titanic effort of many generations, which gave actuality to the emancipation imagination. That to celebrate in our consciousness and conduct a permanent celebration of the sustained and titanic effort of many generations, which gave actuality to the emancipation imagination. And from the beginning, we took the decision that Freedom Park would serve as a monument that would help us to achieve that objective. And proceeding from proposition that freedom for our people who occupy a particular place in the evolution of humanity and human society means more than freedom from colonial and apartheid oppression. We argued that the conceptualization and physical form of Freedom Park must also express the philosophical proposition that freedom is a recognition of necessity. And Albert Einstein is said to have advanced the proposition that human knowledge, and therefore the recognition of necessity, represents a continuous flight from wonder. Thus, the further away humanity has fled from wonder, and therefore gained progressive mastery of the regularities that govern the natural and social worlds, the more this has extended the frontiers of human freedom. And so from the start, we therefore conceptualized and consequently set out to create Freedom Park as an expression of freedom understood in both senses, of finite and an infinite meaning of freedom thus defined. And this has given Freedom Park a truly unique place and space in the rich and varied global panoply of memorial sites which celebrate freedom and human achievement. And among other things, this has dictated an absence of towering monumental constructs on Freedom Park, on the basis of our respect for the fact that no single instance or individual person or phenomenon could possibly assume an extraordinarily monumental proportion that would dwarf all others in the context of an historical period that spans billions of years in the evolution of the natural and human worlds. And surely, this must also serve as a salute to our natural quality of humility and the corollary unequivocal reputation expressed at great cost in human lives of the arrogance of assumed superiority. Additionally, again among other things, the uniqueness of Freedom Park derives from the fact that from the very beginning, we visualized the park as a celebration and monument both to our freedom in its narrow meaning, as well as our freedom as part of humankind, which humankind has striven to accomplish since its emergence from the cradle of humanity, instinctively seeking to achieve freedom based on the correct subjective understanding of objective reality. To capture all this, as far as it concerns Freedom Park, we have therefore wrestled with the challenge to give an architectural and other expression to a monumental presentation spread over an entire hill, which celebrates a history indigenous to our country that is 3.5 billion years old. The architecture at Freedom Park, which highlights stone, the color of mudstone, and wood, surrounded by trees, grass, water, and light, emphasizes the native and yet universal essence of the extraordinary place represented by the park. I trust that where all of us are of one mind about the truly extraordinary importance of Freedom Park. This includes agreement about the quality of sanctity, which surely attaches to a monument that must provide a place of rest for the countless restless souls which have wandered in the wilderness for centuries, as did the soul of Sachi Batman before it found a final place of rest in the Hamtus River Valley in 2002, where she was born 200 years, 2 centuries earlier. The official inauguration of Freedom Park, which our government would also use as a moment to say farewell when it says to the nation, we have done our best to serve the people of South Africa, would also serve as the pinnacle of what the democratic order has done to make the symbolic reparations to the entirety of our society, all of which suffered in various degrees from the gross violation of human rights immanent in all races, belief, and practice. The reparations mandated by the Historic Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I'm therefore saying that one of the unique features of Freedom Park surely is that this is a place where all of our heroes and heroines who have sacrificed ever since the 14th and 15th centuries, sacrificed to defend the freedom of our country, will find a place on this Freedom Park. Freedom Park becomes their home. And therefore it must therefore be a place when those of us who are still alive who visit Freedom Park must draw inspiration that part of our task, because of Freedom Park, must be to defend, not only to celebrate, but to defend the freedom which is encapsulated in Freedom Park, this Freedom Park, which is a home to the souls of the millions who sacrificed for our freedom. But we have mentioned in what I've read, a history of 3.5 billion years that relates to South Africa. So that's the other freedom we spoke about, the freedom of understanding nature, of understanding society, as a result of which you are then able to manage nature, to manage society. You gain that freedom instead of being a victim of that freedom, instead of being a victim of superstition, because you don't understand how nature operates, how society operates. But that freedom to celebrate the South Africa which we discover because of our knowledge, now that of 3.5 billion years old, it's a freedom from the formation of the earth, freedom of understanding, for instance, of the period of the dinosaurs, understanding the kingdom of Mapungubwe, and all of these years of colonialism and apartheid, up to the modern day when we have in the Northern Cape, the Square Kilometer Array telescope, which is investigating the rest of the universe. I'm saying this is the other freedom that we have, which is represented on Freedom Park, which is a mastery of the knowledge about our country and our place. And I think that knowledge about what South Africa is, how old South Africa is, the variety of what it contains, of what it means, must also mean to us that as we visit Freedom Park, we really come out of Freedom Park truly, proudly South African, and therefore feel an obligation that is part of our task to make sure that we make South Africa into the kind of country that it needs to be. I'm saying, talking to now, as we're faced with this challenge of the coronavirus and COVID-19, that all of us need to join hands to make sure that our country emerges out of this a better place, the kind of South Africa that we wanted to be proudly South African, because we are inheriting a country which I'm saying is 3.5 billion years old, which 3.5 years is also celebrated on Freedom Park. Therefore, in all of these instances, this is a very unique creation, and indeed it is a very, very important that we have this occasion to mark its 20th anniversary, and from here it would then be possible to say, as we go forward, more and more of our people must get to know about Freedom Park, visit Freedom Park, and emerge out of it great defenders of freedom and great defenders of a proud and prosperous, successful South Africa. As I end my message, I'd like to read this. What obstacle could conceivably exist which would cause us to fail to celebrate the unparalleled blessing we already hold in our hands, that's the Freedom Park, out of our haunted past, to give birth to a place of peaceful and quiet contemplation, which will make it impossible for us and all humanity to stand in a sacred place and pray in silence. Be still, my soul. Thank you very much.
Kgosi HRM Mabalane is a council member serving the second term, and I would like to call upon him to also come and share his organizational experience.
20 years anniversary is a milestone. We are humbled to celebrate this momentous and indeed an epic event. This is the time to appreciate the vision, legacy, strength, and unity of our forebears and all stakeholders. The joy, pride, confidence, and the audacity for me to render this vote of thanks on this historic and momentous event is overwhelming. This is an organization whose mandate may be equated to the pulse of the nation, which is vested in immense responsibility and a symbol of tortuous journey of sacrifices made for the freedom and the beacon of hope and inspiration for the future. It is a place to engage the fragmented prosperities of our multicultural country, multicultural and multi-ethnic society, and thus expected to engage in integrative processes such as events of national significance. This is an organization that consistently endeavors to contribute to attributes that lead societal harmony, development of national consciousness, as well as bring together multiple identities and perspectives to form an overreaching South African identity, with special focus on nation building, reconciliation, and social cohesion. As servants of the nation in this historic organization at this pivotal moment, we are humbled, honored, and privileged to serve our country through elements that include the beauty and the uniqueness of our heritage, culture, spirituality, and indigenous knowledge systems. It is heartening to serve an organization that tells the South African story through undiluted but an African voice in an African perspective. It is also great pleasure to serve in an organization that has been rated among the 10 most architecturally strikingly beautiful museums of the world. The envisioning and the establishment of this iconic heritage destination, whose main objective is to pay tribute to the fallen heroes and heroines, was not a solo effect. It was a contribution from a collective and indeed the citizenry, whose objective was to depict the South African story of the struggle to liberation. In his book, Animal Farm, Mr. George Orwell writes, open quote, "All animals are equal, but some are more equal than others," close quote. With that stated, it will be remiss of me to dare miss the opportunity to acknowledge and appreciate an invaluable contribution made by the following persons. The late Dr. Nelson Mandela, the first black democratically elected president of the Republic of South Africa, who's also the chief patron of Freedom Park. Dr. Mbeki, a writer, veteran struggle, hero, and father of the second democratically elected president, Honorable former President Mr. Thabo Mbeki. Mr. Thabo Mbeki himself, the second democratically elected President of the Republic of South Africa. Honorable former President of the Republic, Dr. Jacob Zuma, the third democratically elected President, and a veteran liberation struggle. Dr. Mongane Wally Serote, liberation struggle veteran and the second CEO of Freedom Park. Mr. Joe Mudisa, former Minister of Defense. Ms. Gertrude Chope, former Chairperson of the Board. Mr. Revel Fox, an architect and a trustee. Professor Ken Simon, African American architect and teacher. Professor Patabi Rahman, an architect and member of Freedom Park Advisory Committee for Phase 2. Professor Harriet Ngubane, a leading social anthropologist, writer, and teacher. General Andrew Masondo, Chief Operations of Mkondo Wesizwe, and former Lieutenant General of the South African National Defence Force. General Letlogonolo Moloi, former board member. Dr. Nadine Godimia Sworth, African writer, political activist, and recipient of the 1991 Nobel Peace Prize Award. Professor Bernard Magubane, founding editor of the South African Democratic Educational Trust. Professor Victor Ralushai, eminent indigenous knowledge systems expert. Father John Oliver, member of the Western Cape Committee and member of the Cape Town Interfaith Initiative. Mr. Zwelikude Mkize, a member of the Freedom Park Verification Committee. An organization, no matter how well designed, is only as good as the people who live and work in it. I would like to take this opportunity to appreciate and thank the immeasurable contribution of all staff members from the organization's inception to date. The chairpersons, council members, chief executive officers, the Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture, Mr. Honorable Nathi Mthethwa, former ministers of Department of Arts and Culture, Mr. Paulo Jordan, government ministries, Department of Justice, Basic Education, Tourism, Public Works, etc. Our gratitude also goes to the following establishment: the National Prosecuting Authority, the Names Verification Committee, Interfaith Committees, South African Military Veterans, Congress of South African Trade Unions, National Union Coalitions, Ex-Combatant Foundations, Missing Persons Committee, Kulumani Support Group, South African Heritage Council. Most importantly, I would like to thank our client, my fellow citizens of our beloved country, South Africa, the continent and the international community for their ongoing support. Embassies, academics, spiritual leaders, traditional leaders, the business community, schools and institutions of higher learning for their regular support. In those few words, I'd like to thank you.
Some of Freedom Park's objectives are history, culture, and spirituality, all foregrounded on indigenous knowledge systems. These are communicated in an African perspective with an aim to emancipate the African voice. One of the methodologies that are applied is through storytelling. Bungi Swakota Ramshwana is one of Freedom Park storytellers. I am pleased to introduce her to you for a performance.
We stood in long queues, waiting to put our mark on the ballot paper. With joy and excitement, we shouted, "Victory! Freedom has come." You see, it was one man's idea, only one man in the community. He called a meeting of wise men and women. We saw them talking. We could not hear what they were saying. They looked like they were mumbling. The next thing, we had one of the women shouting, "Freedom!" The day came on the 27th of April, 1999. The wise man stood up and said, "A day shall not be far off, where we shall have a people's shrine, a freedom park, where we shall celebrate with all the dignity that they have, those that who fought for this freedom, so that we may obtain it today." The next thing, we saw people digging and digging and digging in the mountain of Salvagop. There was dust everywhere. We did not know what they were doing. You see, some people in the community who were looking for jobs, they started gossiping, celebrating, they were excited. Some were saying, "At last, show me an airport in Pretoria." But some said, "Oh no, it is a mall." But little did they know that it was the Freedom Park, the People's Shrine that Baba Madiba spoke about on the 27th of April, 1999. Then the day came. On the 1st of June, year 2000, former President Baba Thabo Mbeki came to Freedom Park, the People's Shrine, to open that which was. The next thing, we saw people digging and digging and digging in the mountain of Salvagop. We did not know what was happening. A lot of people were surprised. I mean, even those who were looking for jobs. They became so excited. Some thought, "Oh wow, an airport at last in Pretoria?" But some gossip and say, "Oh no, Chomi, it is a mall. At last we are going to get jobs." They were very, very excited. But little did they know that they were actually building the People's Shrine, a Freedom Park. It happened that on the 1st of June, our former president, Baba Thabo Mbeki, came to launch this People's Shrine for the first time after 2 years of conceptualization. He invited us to walk around. The building was so beautiful. It was surrounded by many, many, many things. Amongst those things, the building was surrounded with pure, clean water. It was surrounded with trees. It was surrounded with stones. We wondered what all those things meant. But you see, he told us that the clean water was representing cleansing, because our country have been through a lot of painful experiences and blood being shed. He also told us that the stones and even the boulders that were around Isivivane, they stood for 9 provinces. The 10th one stood for our nation, and the 11th one stood for the international. But again, the question was, what about those trees? You see, the trees that were surrounding Freedom Park, they were meant for healing, which were the herbs that our African people are using. You see, this was such an amazing place because it was conceptualized under the heart or through the heart of Africanism. Everything that you saw around it represented our Africanism. He then invited us to Isivivane. And on our way there, we saw the wall of names, where many, many names were inscribed. And these names were more than 13,900 names of those that died during the struggle. Our hearts were troubled. We became sad. But Baba Thabo Mbeki then told us that, let us move around as I show you things that will enlighten your heart and make you remember that you are an African, that you are an African child, and you should be proud of your Africanism. We walked into a place called Isivivane. We were requested to take off our shoes as the place was seen as a sacred place, which it still is. We took off our shoes, and as we stepped into Isivivane, we could feel pain under our feet, only because the path was so rough. And he said, you see, Baba Madiba told us that the long walk to freedom was not an easy one. It was really a painful one. And this path that we are walking on will remind you of how difficult it was. I raised up my eyes, and as I looked, and I saw many, many people from different faiths. Abanye babephahla, abanye they were dancing and they were singing, and some were praying. There were different people from different faiths. Your Rastafarians, Buddhists, Christians, Izangoma, and many, many other people. But this was amazing because they held hands as they were praying, bephahla, dancing and singing together. They were in unity. And he said, this is what the People's Shrine stands for, unity. We then walked out of Isivivane. He requested us to wash our hands. As we wash our hands, he said, this represents that when you leave a sacred place, you do not walk out and take everything that is within it. You see, Isivivane is not only a sacred place, it is also seen as a place, or it represents a place where spirit of those that died outside of our country, and there were bodies that were never found. Some of the spirits were fetched from different countries, and they were laid in Isivivane. And that is why it is seen as a sacred place. We washed our hands and we left. We walked around, and the next building we saw was Ilekhuta. You see, now, in 20 years at Freedom Park, they had hosted more than 59 head of states from all over the world who came to Lekhuta. At that time, they had not come. We were just being shown the vision. We went around and also saw the gallery of leaders. There were many, many pictures of those that fought for this freedom. Abo Baba Sobukwe, Abo Mama Lilian Ngoyi, and many, many other ones. Lastly, we walked towards a beautiful place. And there was a lot of water. But something amazing, in the midst of water, there was fire that was burning non-stop. And he said, you see, this is called the eternal flame. This fire represents those that died for us. We are saying we will forever remember them, and the fire will always burn in our hearts. We were all in tears. As he said that, he asked us to sit down. And one of the elders who was amongst us told us a story. You see? Africans believe that when a person dies, that his or her spirit lives on. You would hear them say, "Usibani bani uhambile, uye kwelamathonga. So and so is gone to the land of the ancestors." But some would say, "Ushonile, he has said," just like the sun does in the evening and reappears in the morning. But some would say, "Unyamalele, he has disappeared in order to reappear." But some would say, "Uphumlile, he has rested." But you see, my own gogo used to say, "Uye kwagoqanyao," a place where they folded their legs. And you see, this was the position of the corpse in the grave. But my gogo used to say, "Uye kwagoqanyao," a place where they fold their legs, and this was the position of the corpse in the grave. But you see, when the king dies, then they say, "Inkosi ikhotheme." The king has bowed out. Okanye inkosi iguqile. The king has kneeled, yet effective even after death. And when this happens, we would gather around, remembering the one that has passed on. Senze umlindelo. We would sing and would moan, remembering the one that has passed on. But you see, when we bury this king, we would then say, "Siyotshala inkosi." We are going to plant the king. And the king is then seen as the seed from which the nation grows. And when we bury this king, we will put all his weapons inside the grave so that he may continue to protect our nation. You see, all these things, they simply mean one thing, and one thing only, that death is not the end, but it is the beginning. You see, Ubaba Madiba akalelanga uqambalele ucinga icebo lokuthatha uMzantsi Afrika phambili. And he said, "A dream is not a dream until it is shared by the entire community." And today, the dream is complete. 20 years later, on the 1st of June 2020, which is today, we are saying this child is being celebrated. Hala la Freedom Park, hala la Freedom Park, hala la. Continue being a knowledge hub for emancipating the African voice. Continue to express Africanism of our country. Continue to contribute in the healing of our nation, reconciliation and nation building. 20 years later, siyabulela Baba Madiba, siyabulela Mzansi Africa, siyabulela heroes and heroines, and amaqhawe esizwe sethu. Halala.
It was a pleasure being with you. Thank you for joining us. We hope you will visit us on our social media spaces, especially on our website, www.freedompark.co.za. See you soon. Thank you.